Israel should never be rewarded for its violation and for the apartheid regime it does impose on the Palestinian people. As an entity, Israel has progressed from extremism to militarism to colonial expansion. This must stop.
For more on the summit, we can cross to the Ethiopian capital and speak to France 24's Mark Perlman. Mark, let's start with that debate over Israel's observer status. It sounds like leaders essentially decided that the best decision was no decision.
Yes, basically that's a good way to say things because this debate has been raging for days here. Many people lamented that instead of addressing the issues of the pandemic, of poverty, of development, of wars, of terrorism, of coups, there's a lot of time spent on this issue of the observer status of Israel. It was granted several months ago by the president of the Commission of the African Union, Moussa Faki. This is his prerogative. However, this prompted fierce opposition from two heavyweights at the African Union, South Africa, and Algeria. And the heads of state and government debated and decided to appoint a 7-country committee to give a report at the next summit and eventually make that decision. So this means that Israel's observer status is not implemented. It has not been revoked like the Palestinians who came here to ask for that wanted and were backed by Algeria especially. However, this is essentially, as you said, kicking the can down the road.
Well, the drone attack was confirmed by TPLF leader Getachew Reda as well as by aid workers. The targeted camp hosting displaced people is located in northwestern Tigray near the border with Eritrea. It is, however, still extremely difficult to verify any information of the situation in Tigray as the region remains inaccessible and communications are completely shut down. Several airstrikes have been reported in the past week, even as Tigrayan forces announced their withdrawal from neighboring regions. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed had said the army will not fight in Tigray just yet, but these airstrikes are yet another sign that the conflict is far from over. There are almost 2 million people displaced in Tigray due to the war, according to the UN, as well as over 500,000 in the Amhara region. And before this latest airstrike, humanitarian agencies had already recorded at least 146 deaths due to airstrikes in Tigray since October 18th. Generally speaking, the air force capacity of the Ethiopian military and especially drones acquired from abroad have played a major role in this war in recent months and could explain the recent victories over Tigrayan forces.
And Maria, it has been about 14 months now since this fighting broke out between the Ethiopian government and Tigrayan rebels. Can you give us a sense on where things currently stand in the conflict?
Well, there seems to have been a significant decrease in fighting since the month of December after the withdrawal of Tigrayan forces from the Amhara region and from the Afar region. The conflict had spread to these regions over the summer, and TPLF leaders even said that they wanted to descend until the capital, Addis Ababa, to end the de facto humanitarian blockade on Tigray. But their advance stopped about 200 kilometers northeast of Addis Ababa in November, although it's still unclear why exactly they retreated. The government claims military victories, but TPLF leaders assure that they withdrew willfully, while attempts to bring parties to the negotiation table have failed so far. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed seems to have taken a step towards a national reconciliation. On Friday, as Ethiopia celebrated Orthodox Christmas, he released prominent opposition figures, including Jawar Mohammed, as well as some members of the TPLF. However, with these recent airstrikes in Tigray, as well as the very severe humanitarian crisis still unfolding in the region, the question of Tigray is far from solved, although the Prime Minister is clearly in a position of strength at the moment. So we'll have to see how the situation evolves in the coming weeks and how Tigrayan forces will respond to these attacks.
One thing that I think is interesting, obviously Israel-Palestine coming through strong in the news right now. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, let me try to find a different angle than, Israel or Palestine, because I think that's it's just so tribal. If you tell me someone's background or which way they voted, I can tell you how they feel about that particular conflict. Like if you tell me the religion and it is either Muslim or Jew. Well, I think so. As I was thinking about it, perhaps to me the most interesting question is like, why this conflict? So I went looking. Since 2000, do you have an estimate of how many people have been killed in the conflict?
I do, because your brother told me this morning.
Yeah, this is crazy. So it's between 10 and 20,000 people since the year 2000 have died on both sides, primarily Palestinians, have died in this conflict. There's a war called the Tigray War that's been going on since November of 2020 in Ethiopia, and 50,000 people have died. I have not heard mentioned the Tigray War.
Yeah.
I have no idea who's involved. I had to go to Wikipedia to get like basic stats on it. And the question becomes like, wait a second, why this one? It's certainly not the most catastrophic loss of human life. It's probably not even the longest lasting if I searched around the world. I think
you're saying in 20 years, it's had less people die than this war in Africa has had die in less than a year.
Yes. Yes. And that's been true since 2000. There was always something like the Second Congolese War, I think, is the deadliest war of the 22nd. Are we in the 21st or 22nd? 21st century. Yeah. And over 5 million people have died, depending on how you carve up the dates. Like, I think 10 million people if you combine the First and Second Congolese Wars, which really are the same thing.
That's crazy. And the news never covers it. We know nothing about it.
Never covers it. I don't know a damn thing about it.
Yeah.
Hotel Rwanda made one thing about the Rwandan genocide back in the day. I think 60% of Rwandan men were killed. It's insane. So the question is, why this one? And I think one reasonable answer is that the U.S. sends a considerable sum of money to Israel. That's one, okay, so we're involved. But I don't hear that question even being asked. Like, why is our attention being directed here as opposed to anywhere else? And I don't necessarily have the answer, but I just know that if you think this is the trick or the trap that I find myself falling into, if you watch the news and you go, I'm not going to fall for that, I'm not going to fall for that, you're still falling for it because they're still directing your attention at a particular crisis and framing it in such a way such that if you pick either side, you're missing what I would say is the greater thing of like, why are we focusing our efforts and energies here as opposed to everywhere or anywhere else? So just interesting. I don't know why this one is so such a darling of the American people / the American news.